Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. We'll take just a few minutes before we get started. So as everyone's joining in, you can drop in the chat where you lived. I would love to know where you're from and where you're currently living. Yeah, I am joining from the South Florida area. I have lived all over though. New York, I love New York. Welcome, welcome. All right. So we can go ahead and get started. Boise. I was just there a little while ago. I love Boise. A lot of great hiking there. Okay, so we can go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm super excited that you all are here. I'm Jenny, and a big hello to everyone who is watching later. I'll be sharing a little bit about UX UI design and the offerings that we have here at Avocademy. So expect this to be about hour and a half, depending on how many questions there are. I'll do a walkthrough of what UX UI actually is. I'll demo some tools and some of the skills that you would learn as a UX UI designer. You can ask questions in the chat along the way. We'll also have some time about halfway through to answer any questions that you have. And just a heads up that we'll be sending out a survey at the end. And then once you complete it, you will get a $500 off coupon on the course. So stay tuned and make sure to fill out the survey. So we'll do some brief intros. I'm Jenny, like I mentioned earlier. I live in Florida. I'm a product designer. I've been working in design of some sort for over 10 years, and I'm an educator here at Avocademy. We also have Carla, who's one of our career advisors, and she'll be helping me answer questions and anything else that we may need help with along the way. So just a brief overview of Avocademy at a high level. We teach people UX UI design, and we help you get awesome jobs. So we help a lot of different types of people, and our students on average make about 85K a year. We've also helped people land really awesome jobs at a lot of well-known companies around the US. So we'll be talking about a lot in the next hour and a half. We're going to squeeze in a lot of info. So we're going to first define what UX UI actually is. We'll talk about who are UX designers, who are we as like humans. We'll talk about some common UX design skills, what it's like to transition into UX, and how Avocademy can help you. We'll also do a demo of some common tools that you can expect to see if you end up transitioning into UX UI design, and we'll have lots of time for question and answer. So before we dive into a lot of great information, I want you to take a moment and write down 2 reasons you want to learn UX UI design. And once you have a few reasons, if you feel comfortable, you can share in the chat. So as you are kind of thinking through this, you can think about why you are interested in UX UI design, what type of opportunities you think it would present for you, anything along those lines. So we'll just take a moment or two. And once you have something, you can go ahead and add it in the chat if you feel comfortable. Okay. Well, it looks like, let me share some things that I kind of thought about as I was starting to learn UX UI design. I know learning UX UI design for me presented a lot of opportunity. Whenever I transitioned into the field, it meant that I was going to make a lot more money. It meant that I would have a lot more flexibility. It meant that I would have a whole new skill set and learn a lot of things that I can continue on in my future career. And then I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Lena said the creativity and flexibility the field offers. Absolutely. Yeah. It's such of a fun balance between it's such of a fun balance between like very like systematic thinking as well as creativity. So yeah, there is a lot there. I'm interested in doing because I think about how software could be better for users a lot. Yeah, that is exactly what we do. Like I'm sure a lot of us use a lot of apps on a day-to-day basis that we're like, man, we could design this so much better, and the user experience could be so much better. Let me see, Maisha, the field seems like one where I could find fulfillment and creative outlet. Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely consider myself a creative person, and working in creative fields can be really tough oftentimes to make a lot of money and to make a sustainable amount of money. And I think UX UI is like one of those like niches where we get to be super creative, as well as have a stable income. Yeah, these are all really great reasons. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, so first we'll start with what UX UI actually is. So UX UI is a relatively newer field in relation to like engineering or like architecture, all of these fields that have been around for hundreds, thousands of years. And UX UI is very new. So there's a lot of kind of ambiguity and a lot of newness that comes with this field. So I first want to clarify what these terms actually mean, because I think there can be a bit of ambiguity here. So when we say UX UI design, we're talking about design as it pertains to apps and website design. So I like to think about UX UI in terms of architecture. So when we talk about UX design, it usually is related to functionality. And when we say UI design, it's more of the look and feel. So I like to think of UX design as like the foundation of the house. It really ensures that the structure is very solid, it's functional, and it's user friendly. So just like architects really think about the layout and how people move, UX design is how people move through digital experiences. So oftentimes UX designers focus really heavily on what's called usability. So being able to use something without a lot of friction, and also making sure that it is very intuitive. So when we talk about UI design, the overall look and feel, I like to think of UI design as the interior design of a home. So we want to make sure that the overall design is appealing and really cohesive. So just like an interior designer focuses on the elements like colors, textures, materials that give a home a certain style and atmosphere, UI designers really add life to the user experience by selecting styling elements like colors, icons, button styles, font choices, things along those lines. So I almost hesitate to separate the two because they're so closely intertwined. So you can't have good UX without a awesome UI, and you can't have great UI without UX. So there is a lot of overlaps here. But if we had to separate the two and define them, this is a nice way to think about it. We also want to think about UX UI design, not only in the like actual design part, but also as it relates to UX research. So UX research highly influences the design, and it really makes sure that we understand our users. So when we say UX research, what we mean is really like doing research, like interviewing people, understanding what their needs are, what they currently do. We may watch them use an app or a certain experience to understand how are they actually understanding it. Oftentimes, UX research is really helpful to building out a great user experience. So when we talk about UX, it is a few things. So the first one is the interaction of people and technology. So it tends to focus on the interaction between users and a product or service. So if you have a piece of technology, let's say like Uber's rideshare algorithm, it's kind of useless to most people if there's not some type of user interface. There's not some type of user experience that they can interact with. It's just a bunch of code. So our role as UX UI designers is to take all of that underlying information, all of that technology, all of that code, and bring it to life and make sure that people can use it in an enjoyable way. So technology is everywhere, and good design has really huge impacts on whether people can use a piece of technology or not. UX design is oftentimes people-centered. It's always people-centered. So I really love this quote in particular. So people ignore design that ignores people. So UX design is not just about making something look pretty or doing awesome animations. It's about really understanding your users and the people behind the technology so that they have the best experience and can do the thing that they came there to do. It's also very multidisciplinary, and this is one of my favorite parts of UX UI design. So it really combines a lot of elements of psychology, design, branding, interaction design, and usability to create a meaningful experience. Oftentimes, UX designers don't necessarily have like a super long design background. We see a lot of UX designers come from a lot of different fields because there are so many different ways that you should be thinking about a user experience. It's not just about the like visual design. It is also about understanding user behavior. It is about understanding what is best practices. There are a ton of different things that go into UX design. I also want to note that I'm kind of shorthanding UX UI design into just UX design, and you will hear this often as well. I know it can be a little confusing, but when I'm saying UX design, I kind of mean the whole gambit of UX UI design. Okay, so I know we've been talking kind of abstractly about what UX UI design actually is. So I want to go through some really good examples of UX. So Airbnb, this is an awesome example of good user experience. So when Airbnb came out, there was other rental sharing services, but Airbnb's differentiator is their user experience. So they are known within the design community as the go-to for a really good design and what to do. So they have a really clean user interface. It's really easy to use, and it really anticipates a lot of the questions and information people want to know about. Another great one is Slack. And some of you might have used this before, and some of you might have not. So Slack really revolutionized how we interact in the workplace. And a big part of its success is due to its very intuitive and user-friendly design. So it has a really clean and minimalistic user interface, and it really prioritizes ease of use and quick access to its essential features. So we see other popular apps, so like Discord, also follow a similar pattern as Slack. And another great one is Spotify. Spotify's UX is awesome. It really prioritizes simplicity and ease of use. So its UX has really set a has set a benchmark for other music streaming services. So I remember when iTunes first came out a long, long time ago, and it was really hard to use. I felt like I had to Google how to use it each time that I opened it up or had to do something new. And then Spotify came on the market. And the minute that I used it, I was like, wow, this user experience is so much better than iTunes. It is super intuitive. I know exactly what to do. And even though I invested already a ton of time on iTunes, I ended up switching over to Spotify because the user experience was so much better. So user experience has huge impacts, and people are willing to either use a product or not use a product because of its ease of use. Okay, maybe like a sad face example of user experience, so like a not so great example. Has anybody ever used a government website, maybe like out of necessity? I recently had to update my driver's license, and in order to update my driver's license, I had to make an appointment on the Florida Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles website. And it was awful. It took me forever to figure out what I had to do. I didn't know after I made the appointment if it had saved. There were so many things about it that I really disliked. And if I didn't have to use it, I would have never used it again. So oftentimes you can differentiate a good user experience from a bad user experience. If it's doing the things that you expect it to do, that is good. And if it's not doing the things that you expect it to do, then that is typically a bad user experience. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit into who are UX UI designers. So UX UI designers usually come from a range of backgrounds. Like I mentioned before, UX UI design is relatively new. It didn't even really have a name until the 90s. So there's not many people that, kind of grow up and like, you know what, I think I want to be a UX UI designer, because it just hasn't been around for that long. So a lot of UX designers have a lot of diverse backgrounds. Oftentimes people maybe go to school or have started in a career in one area, and then they end up transitioning into UX UI design. So typically having a diverse background is an asset. So as UX designers, the more perspective and like the better and wider lens that you can bring to the table beyond just design expertise, it really makes you a stronger designer. So we have people in our program right now that have an education background, a retail background, construction, graphic design, theater, healthcare, you name it. We have seen, and I've also worked with a lot of people that had just come from a lot of various backgrounds. It's very common. So in a nutshell, what we do is we make products or services usable, enjoyable, and accessible. So when we say usable, we mean, can people accomplish what they came there to do with very little challenges? When we say enjoyable, it's, do they actually like using it? Is there a sense of delight in actually interacting with it? And then accessible, can people of every ability use it? So we as UX designers are creative problem solvers. So one of my favorite parts of UX design is the creative problem solving. So most of our work is really taking user problems or business problems and creating really awesome designs that solve those specific problems. Oftentimes, we work with other members of our teams, like engineers, project managers, and other people in the organization to get really clear on the problems that we are solving, so that we are making sure that we are solving the right thing. Next is we are empathetic. This is a huge part of UX design. So we as UX designers, we really want to be able to see other people's perspectives other than our other than our own. So there is a mantra in UX that goes something like, you are not your user. And what this means is that it's not necessarily what I, as Jenny, want in something. It's about understanding what the user group that who I am designing for actually needs. So like an example of this is I used to work in healthcare, and our demographic was the age of 65 and older, and people with heart disease. So it was really hard to put myself in those people's shoes because I am in my mid 30s and I do not have heart disease. I am a healthy 30-year-old. So one thing that came in handy so that I can get inside of the mind of those particular user groups is by doing UX research. And sometimes you will do UX research. Oftentimes in companies, you will have a UX research team. But when we wanted to better understand who our users were so that we could better design for them, we ended up interviewing with them. What we wanted to know is, what does their day-to-day look like? What do they struggle with? What are their hopes and what are their fears, right? And then by understanding those things, we're able to better design an experience that actually meets their needs versus designing something that we think that they may want, but they don't actually need. And the next is we are very collaborative. So design is definitely a team sport. So you as a UX designer will work with other designers. You may work with engineers, with project managers, with the marketing team. UX design is oftentimes the kind of center of a lot of workshops and like brainstorming sessions. So if you've ever seen people in like a room with a lot of sticky notes, just like writing ideas all over, that is a brainstorming session. And we do that a lot as UX designers. It kind of helps us get our thoughts out. And then we also collaborate with our users. So this may be through something like user testing to understand, okay, I have designed this thing. Now I want to watch a user use my design to understand where I can make it even better. So let's take a quick pause, and I want to see if there's any questions so far. If any of the questions pertain to these, I may save them if I think I'm going to answer them later. But we can just take a quick pause right now and see if there's any questions. You can add the questions in the chat. And I see a few more people have joined. Welcome. So people from Tampa, Houston, Texas. I was just in Austin. Kansas. Hi. Any questions so far? Okay. Well, we can keep on going. If you all have any questions along the way, yeah, you can add them in the chat. Okay. So let's move on to UX UI design skills. So you may be thinking, what type of skills will I need as a UX designer? So we've talked a lot about like soft skills and more like mindset. What is it like to be in the mind of a UX designer? But let's talk a little bit more about the actual skills, the more tangible skills. So in UX design, we have a general what's called a design process. So we typically have these 5 phases. So we have empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And then in each of these areas, in each of the phases, we have different tools to help us accomplish our goals in each of the phases. So in the empathize phase, this is where we're really trying to understand who our users actually are. So we may do UX research, so like user interviews, surveys, observations, anything along those lines. In the define phase, this is where we're trying to get very clear about the problem that we are solving. Design is oftentimes at the center of a lot of different teams throughout the organization. So the engineering team may think that we are solving problem A, why designers think we are solving problem B, and then product managers may think that we are doing C. So in this define phase, this is where we're really working on gathering as much information as we can so that we can really define the problem that we are solving. So we're using our skills and our time in the right place. Next is ideate. So ideate is like my favorite part of UX design. This is where you get to think of all of the possibilities. So this is where you do a lot of sketching and like thinking and just thinking through all of the different ways that you could possibly solve the problem that you defined in the define phase. And usually in the ideate phase, there are no wrong answers. We like are really encouraged to kind of think big, think small, everywhere in between. So it's a really awesome phase. And then we get to the prototyping phase. So this is where we start to get a little clearer about the solution that we are actually building. So this is where we might build out things like visual designs and prototypes. And I'll walk through what these terms actually mean a little later. And then we get to the test. So after we have really empathized with our users, we've defined the problem, we've thought of a million different ideas, and then we've kind of narrowed it down into a single solution. Now we are going to test with our users and see, does this solution actually work? So we oftentimes do this through user testing, usability testing, A/B testing, things along those lines. So I want to kind of run through some of the most important ones that I think, I do on a day-to-day basis as a UX designer. So you're going to have a lot of tools in your toolbox. That's how I like to think of each of these. So we are going to go through a few, but by no means is this a full list. So the first one is sketching. So it's really important for designers to be able to get ideas down on paper super quickly. And I think that this phase can sometimes scare people because you're like, well, I'm not like a great drawer or anything, which is totally okay. Sketching is a really great tool for what is called iterative design. So this is just getting something out of your head and on paper just to see, does this actually make sense? You may have a few conversations at this stage with like other designers just to get a feel for the overall direction you are going to go. One of the major benefits of sketching is that it's usually really quick. So if you don't like something, you can just crumple it up and throw it away. Next is UX designers focus a lot on information architecture. So this is really understanding how people are moving through the application and if it makes sense. So what we're looking at right now is what's called a user flow. And this is this is showing basically in a diagram view what screens and what actions people are taking as they open up the app, as they land on the home screen, as they go through a flow to accomplish a certain task. So really look at this as like a bird's eye view to understand what that overall user experience looks like. This really helps us understand kind of what's there and helps us understand if there's any like inefficiencies or if there's any like decision making that we're not very sure about. Next is wireframing, and I can pause for a second. It looks like there's a question. Can you please tell about affinity mapping? Sure, yeah, absolutely. Affinity mapping is a really great tool. This is more of a research tool, but it can be used a lot. So actually, let me see if I have an example. I don't think I have an example of affinity mapping. No. I have that. Okay, so affinity mapping is most commonly used for large amounts of user research. So let's say that I interviewed 5 people and I want to analyze the data so that it's so that it actually makes sense. So oftentimes I'll take all of the information that I got from the user interviews and I will put them on sticky notes. And then I will start to create themes out of them. So maybe I might take all of the information from from all of my users, and I may lump all of the challenges of those users into a theme. Maybe I make another section that is more about what are the tools that they're using. So I would really look at affinity mapping as a way to kind of organize large amounts of data so that you can start to kind of analyze it and make sense of it. And then that would come oftentimes before, I would say like before sketching. That's more in like the user research stage. But you can also use that in a lot of different areas. Okay, so next is the wireframing. So let's think back to the architecture example. Wireframing is like the blueprints of design. So it's really the basic layout of the design without any like styling. So without any color, without any images, things along those lines. So when we think about like wireframing, this just helps us get the overall kind of frame. Like I like to think of this as like a skeleton on a paper. And then in our next phase, which is the high fidelity screens, this is really where we start to bring more of the look and feel. This is where we start to add colors, styling, maybe different types of fonts, icons, things along those lines. And then after we have good high fidelity screens, we can put together what's called a prototype. And a prototype is basically like mimicking what we expect the final experience to actually look like without doing any coding. So prototyping is a great way to get a feel for what the experience is going to actually be without spending a lot of time and money actually building it out and coding it and engineering, and all of that stuff. So oftentimes we use prototypes when we do user testing. We may use prototypes to demonstrate different like interactions and how people move through an experience. And lastly, we have research. So research is one of the backbones of UX design. So this is oftentimes where you do affinity mapping. So research really helps us make informed decisions and really provides evidence to help us make those updates. So we may find UX research and like interviewing people, sending out surveys, usability testing. Those are the three most common ways. Okay, so we're going to do a quick demo. I'm going to show you FigJam and Figma. I need just a moment to kind of adjust my screen. So if you want to get up and stretch, I highly recommend that. I know it's a little later on a Friday afternoon. So give me just a moment and I will transition. All right. All right. So we are looking at a tool called FigJam. And I really love FigJam. It is a digital whiteboarding tool. And I use it all the time, especially if I'm working with people who are in different locations. So we can see Carla on the screen over here. We can each work on this particular thing. So maybe I might want to like wave to Carla. Let me see if like the waving's going to work. It isn't working. No, it isn't working. But yeah, you can do things like add sticky notes. So like if I wanted to add like this is a note. This is a note. And then Carla could see that in real time. Hi, Carla. Yeah. So I really love this tool, and I just want to give you maybe like one example of how you could use it and how you will use it. How is FigJam different than Figma? That is a really great question. So I would look at FigJam as a whiteboarding tool. So like a way to get ideas down. Maybe you are doing like brainstorming sessions. Maybe you want to build out a diagram. I really like this tool. So like this is a diagram up here. This is a great tool for building out diagrams. Maybe you are working on like a workshop and you have maybe 10 or 15 people on, you can start to do a lot of like super fun things. Figma is more for actual design. So it's when you're actually building out the UIs and the user interfaces. So FigJam, more of a whiteboarding tool, more of like a brainstorming tool, and Figma is more of the design tool where you will actually build out designs. Okay, so I want to run through what like a typical workflow could look like for you as a UX designer. So I want to introduce an idea called a persona. This is one of the tools in your toolbox. We're then going to sketch out an idea. I'm then going to show you how to build a wireframe. And then we're going to turn that wireframe into a high fidelity screen. So first, let's start with a persona. So a persona is basically like an archetypical end user. Oftentimes you build personas based on user research. And personas include information like maybe user needs, motivations, pain points, and challenges. So I put together kind of a lightweight one for this. These can actually get very, very dense. But let's just say that we are building something out for Stacy, and Stacy is a shopper, and we're going to be focusing on building out the home screen for an e-commerce mobile application. So we have identified through user research that Stacy wants to find things very quickly. She wants to browse and purchase on both mobile and desktop, and easily wants to share things. Maybe some of their motivations is they like to stay on top of trends, and then they also value socially conscious practices. And some of the pain points that they find is finding stylish clothes for a reasonable price, as well as sustainably made clothes. So we're going to sketch out a home screen. And I am going to sketch using this like digital tool. I wouldn't say that this is its like primary use, so I asked for a little bit of grace if this is a little strange. It is going to be very abstract. So first, if we're sketching, we're going to start out with our frame. So just to get like a general like bounding box, I may first start with my bottom navigation. I'm just going to add some circles. These are like icons. And then they maybe have like labels underneath. So these are like the buttons or like the navigation that you would press to get from page to page. I may have like a logo at the top. I may have some type of a profile up here. What else? I maybe have some type of an area that's like a search area, or maybe this is like a filter. So I don't exactly know what this is going to be yet. So I'm just going to kind of block this in that it's a filter. Again, excuse the scribble. Okay, next is we maybe have some what's called cards. So maybe this is like a preview, so like an image of a shirt, for example. We may have the price. We may have a little heart right here where I can favorite that. And maybe we have like the name of the product. And then I'll just build out 2 of those. You know, again, I'm just trying to get the general feel for what the UI could actually look like. Okay. And then maybe I have like a header up here. And by like a header, I mean, this is a specific category. Maybe this is like a suggested for you. It helps me understand what information is below it. So maybe I have another one of these, another header, maybe this like latest styles, and I'm building, maybe I have a slightly different pattern, something like this. Okay, and then there we go. It's our sketch. So what I did here was just try to get out generally what I was thinking in terms of a home screen. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a screenshot of that, and I'm going to turn this into a wireframe. So I'm again going to have to switch my screen. Give me just a moment. Okay, and now I'm going to land on, this is Figma. Okay, and I'm just going to paste this right here before I forget. Move this over here. I'm going to use this as like a reference. So Figma is going to be probably the primary tool, or one of the primary tools that you will use as a designer. And this is a pretty common tool right now. It is very ubiquitous, but there's other tools such as like Sketch and Adobe XD that also does kind of the same thing. Figma, I found, is by far the most user friendly and is used by a lot of different design teams. It also has a lot of flexibility. So now we're going to build out the wireframe. And again, the wireframe is really that underlying page architecture. So first, I've already added in the hardware details here. Maybe I just want to kind of block in. Maybe there's like a logo at the top. And before I move on, you may notice that there's these like pink bars here. This is what's called a grid. And this helps us make sure as designers that everything is staying like very aligned and very straight. So I could turn these on and off. So this is how you would actually view it without any grids, but I'm going to keep it on just to help me design. Okay, next is I'm going to add in maybe a filter. So like something like this. And if I were to turn off the grid, let me show you what that looks like. Maybe I want like a count of the number of clothes there, some like filtering options, and then maybe some quick filters right here. Next is let's add in our latest style. So I'm going to go ahead and turn back on my grid. So I want to make sure that this is aligning to this edge right here. I'm going to go ahead and pull over these cards just for the sake of time. I have already built this out. So we see here that we have this as kind of a placeholder for some type of an image in this area. And then this is denoting, this is where the price would go, the name of the product, as well as if I wanted to heart it or favorite it. Okay, and then next we want to build out the bottom part down here. So I may move this over here, suggested for you, and then I'm going to move these over here. Okay, and then lastly, I want to add in the navigation. So it's going to look something like this. So at this point, we have a wireframe, you know, again, a general idea of what this UI will actually look like. Without really spending a lot of time on what the kind of styling and the color is going to look like. One of the super big benefits of this is that you can really focus on what this pattern is going to actually be, what type of information is going to be on the screen, without having the added having to think about, okay, like what are the colors going to be? What are the font styles going to be? What are the images going to be? So now that we have our wireframe, I'm going to move over and we're going to build out our high fidelity screen. So I just already have this over here. I'm going to go ahead and everything built out. So first I'm going to replace this. I'm going to go ahead and add that in here. This is my very hastily made logo. I am not a graphic designer, so please ignore the graphic design of this specific logo. And that is something to note. Like, we as UX designers, we are not like graphic designers. We do not like design logos. We don't design like a lot of things that maybe like graphic designers or brand designers would do. Okay, next is I want to add some images into here. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do something that's probably going to look weird for just a moment. I'm going to go to my fill. I'm going to go over here. And I'm basically telling Figma that instead of a color, I now want to add an image. So I'm going to go ahead and add an image in here. And then we may want to move that so that, let's just move this up so more of the focus is on the actual t-shirt. Okay, so something like that. Now I'm going to come here. I'm going to do the same thing over here. T-shirt, that's fine. Maybe I want to put this in. I'm going to add this below. Okay, and I'll have to adjust that image. I'll just move this down so we can see more of the image like that. And then what else? We have a few images here, so maybe I'll take this one. Okay, and then next we see that we have some areas where we want to make it look a little more realistic. So maybe instead of having the price and the name of the product, I'm actually going to add in a price here. So maybe I'll put like $34.99, and then a black tea. I guess tea would not be like the drink; it would be like the t-shirt. Okay, next we're going to add in a price here. So let's say this one's going to be $23.99. And then we'll do white t-shirt. Okay, and then we already have here, maybe this is, what do we want to add here? Latest styles, eco-friendly, and then let's just say like sustainable. Now, next week, we can really start to add more things to this. Let me just clean this up. I'm going to delete that. Maybe we actually want to add a bit of color here. So it's not just like black, white, and gray. So I may come here. I'm going to use my colors down here, and I can update this. Maybe I want to, let me see if this will work. Well, I was going to fill that in, but it is not working for me. But we could, at this point, start to fill this in with different colors. We could also start to, let's see, kind of, we could start to add a bit of detail to here. So we can start to like round the edges and things along those lines. So now we have our high fidelity screen. So this is really the end screen that we would then kind of hand off to our engineering team and start to have conversations with them to see what is doable, and if they could actually do the overall design. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to the okay, and it looks like there is a question, Janice, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. What is the average time it takes to create a full wireframe on Figma? That is a really awesome question, and I'm going to answer it with it depends. Sometimes wireframes can be done super quickly. So what I showed you was like super quick, unless you wanted to be here for a long time. I like to think of like wireframing as maybe like the first pass. It can be kind of quick, but then you may go through what's called a few iterations. So oftentimes your first design that you do is not the final design. You oftentimes build something, maybe you have a conversation with another like design member or with the engineering team, and you find out, okay, maybe we need to like adjust this and we need to move this around. Or maybe you do user testing, and then you find out that the design needs to be changed around. So it can really depend. It can really depend. Okay, so let's move on. If there's no other questions. Okay, Another good question. Let's just also, is UX a good for someone who has background in digital marketing, and how are the skills transferable? Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing, well, there are a lot of different things. I think one, you as a digital marketer, you already understand brand, right? You already understand what it means to communicate a company's kind of personality to its users. Oftentimes designers could actually be a lot better in understanding marketing and understanding more of the business side and how we are trying to get users to use our products. And it's not, I hate to say this, but it's not always about what is the best user experience. We oftentimes have to make a few compromises with the business side, with the marketing team, to make sure that not only is the product usable, but people are actually getting there. They actually kind of understand what's on the screen. So I think that there are a lot of overlapping skills. Okay, it looks like we have a few other questions. What kind of beginner projects would you recommend to get experience from start to finish? Project, user flow, sketch, wireframe, prototyping, etc. Yeah. Well, I would say if you end up joining our program, that's exactly what we do. Is we help you define a project that you will work on, and you'll go through each of the stages. So I personally can find it hard to kind of go through, and what I showed you was just a few of a lot of things that you will need to know as a UX designer. But yeah, if you were to join the course, we will help you define what the problem is and then kind of walk you through each of those steps so that you have a really solid understanding of what those steps are and how they fit into the bigger picture. But it's something that you could just do in the moment, is start to, all of us interact with a lot of websites and apps on a day-to-day basis. I think something that we could all do just for 5 or 10 minutes every day is just really look at apps that you use on a day-to-day basis and try to understand what makes them so good, right? Start to deconstruct them. Start to understand, okay, what is good design and what is bad design? When does something work how I want it to work and how I expect it to work, and how does something not work like that? You can maybe take an app that you think could be improved, and you could start to think of different ways of imagining what that user experience actually is. How long should a small scale practice project take? I think it really depends. I think it depends on what you mean by small. If we mean by small, just designing a screen, it could take you 30 minutes. It could take you 30 hours. It really depends. But I think one of the best things that you can do is really is start to pay attention to user experiences. Are all the Figma files saved in the cloud online, or do you need an external hard drive? Yeah, also really good. So one of the wonderful things of Figma is that it's all saved in the cloud and you don't have to save anything. It saves it automatically. So there's never going to be a, oops, I worked for 10 hours and I lost everything. That just isn't going to happen. Yeah. I think we'll talk about that more later, because as I think, yeah, I think it's a good combination, but we'll talk about more about that later. And if it isn't answered, then we can circle back to it. And yeah, I think we're starting to see a lot of interesting integrations into a lot of our tools. and how I like to think about AI as it relates to UX, or I think a lot of different roles right now, is that it's going to be very complementary to how we do our job. There are a lot of things that take a lot more time than any of us want them to take. And they're really the things that like don't really matter. It's like not like the thinking things. It's like not the things that you want to be spending a lot of time on. It's like kind of more of like the mundane tasks, the things that people have done over and over again for years, thousands, millions of different designers. And I think we're starting to see AI as a great way to really streamline a lot of the things that we are doing and really helping us to do our jobs better. Yeah, we are starting to see like AI within Figma, chat GPTs making it a lot easier for us to come up with like ways of saying things. A lot of UX design is being able to communicate the right words, right? And also we see a lot of ways that AI is being used to help us analyze user research. So like large amounts of data. Before, what might have taken user researchers like, I don't know, weeks, AI can now start to come up with like 80% of what we need to know in a very short amount of time. So I'm really glad to hear that you are kind of exploring that. Okay, and then I think I just answered Janice's. Yeah, I think I just answered that. But just to recap, I see AI as really complementing a lot of our current workflows, helping to like streamline and make things a lot quicker for us so that we as UX designers can focus on the more interesting parts, like how we are actually solving problems, not spending hours creating the perfect icon or like the perfect icon set, which a computer can do like really easily. Okay, so I'll continue on. Let me see. So what type of companies can you work for? So who is hiring UX UI designers? So there are a lot of opportunities within the UX field. And I think oftentimes, when we think about UX, we think about UX as only in tech roles. So in like a tech company like Google, etc. But you have UX designers and like companies that you wouldn't necessarily define as tech companies. So I see a lot of UX designers in like insurance and on learning platforms and e-commerce and banking. I was just at a training on Wednesday and I met a designer from Capital One, and they have thousands of designers there. And I was like mind blown because I wouldn't think that like a banking company would have a ton of UX designers, but they do. If like we think about all of the apps and like the web experiences, it all takes a lot of design. So there is design everywhere. So these are just a few. This is like a fraction of the type of companies that you could work for. But I think my main takeaway for you is that most companies now have some type of a digital presence online. And that means that they need designers. They need designers to actually design out what those websites, what those apps look like. Okay, so let's talk about some of the fun stuff. First, I want to acknowledge that transitioning careers is very hard. It takes a lot of work. When you're transitioning careers, you are building up a new skill set, you are building up a new network, you need a lot of experience. So I sometimes like to think of like transitioning and, moving towards a direction of like something that could provide you a lot more opportunity as thinking like health goals. So if you want to be healthier, you have to put in the work to actually make it happen. You have to learn new skills. So like if you're working out, you have to learn what is a bench press, right? What is like high intensity high intensity interval training? What is all of these different things, that will help me get to the place that I want to be. You also have to build new habits and new ways of thinking. It's also really helpful to have guidance too. So like when you are learning how to work out or you're working towards certain health goals, you oftentimes can have like a trainer or some type of a health coach. It's also really helpful to surround yourself with people who are also working towards the same goal. It can be very motivating. I personally find it very hard to kind of embark on something that's hard and different and all by myself. So anytime that I look to like learn a new skill or do something, I like being around other people who are also doing the same thing because we're all kind of going through the same thing at the same time. So as hard and as challenging as it can possibly be to transition careers, people do it all the time. And we help humans all the time transition careers. So we can definitely help you get there. So you're going to learn what skills you need to know as a UX designer. So you're going to get experience working with clients. You're going to get mentorship, accountability, and community along the way. So I also want to call out that I feel like it's maybe sometimes a common misconception that everyone has a very linear career path. And this just isn't true. I think for the most of us, we kind of try out something and then we figure out it is not for us. So if you're finding yourself in the area where you're like, I don't feel super relevant and in the job market, I don't have like the right skills, I want to move into something else, just look at, this kind of pivot and this transition in your career as just that. It's just a pivot. You are upskilling, you are staying relevant within the job market. So I want to show you how we can act as a guide for you if you decide to transition careers and what your path could look like at Avocademy. So our program is split into two parts. We have our foundations and our career jumpstart program. So our foundations program is a 16-week course. And in the foundations program, you're going to learn the most relevant skills. You will also get a lot of mentorship along the way. I think our mentorship is like super top notch and it is a differentiator for sure. So after you finish with the foundations course, you would apply for Career Jumpstart. You would, and in our Career Jumpstart program, you would get advanced design skills. You're going to get experience working with clients and other designers. And we're also going to help you with the actual job search. So we're going to help you with a resume, with interviewing, leads, references, anything that you may need to transition into an actual role. Oh, excuse me. So our foundations course, so I'll mostly focus on our foundations course since that would be a first step. And in our foundations course, you would complete 22 activities. And you'll learn a lot of lessons about skills related to UX, UI design. So you'll have video walkthroughs of each of the activities. We have a lot of resources that we have compiled over the years. And at the end of the foundations course, you'll have one full case study and a website portfolio. And of course, we will help you step by step along the way. You will also have access to over 100 mentors. So at any time of the day, you can hop on calls with our one-on-one mentors early in the morning, late at night. We realize that a lot of you work and have a full-time job. We have lots of mentors that are spread out and often have early availability, oftentimes evening availability. So I want to say that like you'll learn a lot from these mentors. They have a lot of experience. They have been working in the design field for a very long time. and you will soak up so much knowledge and be able to ask so many questions to these very knowledgeable mentors. You'll also get access to our Slack community. So this is where you can ask questions, you can communicate with our mentors and other students. We'll also post events, resources, things along those lines. And then we also have a monthly speaker series. So every month we host speakers so that students can learn from people working in the field. So you can ask questions and connect with them. We also have a really big archive of all of our previous speaker series. So there's over 50 speaker series where you're learning from designers at all stages in their career, and designers that have a pretty diverse job roles. So you may see people who are very senior that are working on like design strategy. You may see people that work on more content strategy, maybe more like visual designers. You name it. We've had speakers of all over the spectrum. So we are kind of wrapping up. I want to do a quick recap of what we covered. So we talked about what is UX UI design, who are UX designers, what are some common UX skills, what it's like transitioning into UX, and how we can help. So we can go into any Q&A. I'm sure there's a few questions that I haven't answered. Good work ethic. Is it good work ethic within the UX field to specialize in a focused niche, for example? Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think it's really good to have an idea of where you want to be within the UX field. UX is very broad. You can do UX within healthcare, you can do UX within insurance, you can do UX within education. So I would say, yeah, if you have a very good idea of where you want to be, that will make it that much easier as you are moving into a job, for sure. And then in terms of specializing, should you do it? I think absolutely. I think the more that you can gain industry knowledge in like one particular area, that's really going to help you be able to differentiate yourself. So like I mentioned before, I used to work for a healthcare company, and that company really like the like ideal UX designer was a designer that had some type of a healthcare background, because that meant that if we had someone who understood that specific industry, there's so many like words and concepts and policy and things along those lines behind healthcare, that if you already have that is a major asset to any company. So especially as a newer designer, if you have a lot of knowledge within the healthcare industry, but like, let's say you are a little newer in like the UX field, that could kind of even itself out, right? Because they'll have to teach you less here, but they may have to teach you more in like design. Any other questions? All right, well, I will pop up some info here. If you want to reach out to us, you can contact us at info@avocademy.com. Oh, it looks like we're getting a few more questions. Okay, how are personas important for UX? How personas are important for UX design? Yeah, that is an awesome question. So personas, I would think of personas it's a way for us to conceptualize the end user, right? Whenever we are designing, it can be really hard without some type of visual, without some type of artifact to kind of reference back to and say, yes, like I am designing for Stacy, right? And these are Stacy's needs. And these are the things that when I am designing an experience, I need to keep in mind. Without personas, I think it can be hard to like really remember that and really like wrap our minds around what are the different people that we are actually designing for. Now, I'm going to take kind of an opposing point of view because this can be kind of yeah, there's a lot of different opinions of personas within UX right now. So some say that sometimes personas are not as useful as we actually want them to be. So sometimes a company will spend a lot of time developing personas and then they never get used. So there's really no point to actually having them. There is kind of a movement and kind of a transition into another method. It's called jobs to be done, where you're focusing a little less on this archetypical human, and you're focusing more on what do they actually want to accomplish. So there's some pros and cons with personas, but it is a very common deliverable within UX. And it looks like Carla just added a link to the survey. So you can go ahead and click that link and you'll get $500 off. Yeah, perfect. Any other questions? Okay, awesome. Well, I appreciate you all so much for joining. Thanks for all of the awesome questions. It is always great when people ask questions, things that like I didn't even think of. So awesome, and have a awesome weekend.